what is it, 10 to 15,000 kids a year go into these camps.
Yeah.
In Ohio, 4% of them, like, they don't reoffend.
Right.
4% in Ohio. 96% of the children who go into these military boot camps in Ohio go right back to doing the same exact thing, reoffend.
Wow. It's the same for the fat camps.
Yeah, so it's like if you have a 4% success rate,
wow,
how the fuck is that acceptable as an industry?
Yeah.
An industry that's growing and makes billions of dollars a year.
100%.
4%.
If I had an insurance policy that only covered me for 4% of the things that happened in Ohio,
I would stop paying for that insurance policy.
I would stop paying for that immediately.
If that insurance policy sexually assaulted my child, I would immediately
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this and totally redeem yourself.
Yo, what's up, Internet? Welcome back to another episode of 3 Averagely Intelligent Dudes, and today we're discussing dangerous ideas. And the idea we have for you today, we're talking kid camps, man.
Kid camps.
Yeah, if you guys don't know what we mean by kid camps, you obviously don't have a troubled teen at home.
I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah,
it's a camp for kids of varying different reasons.
Yeah, but I think we're more aiming towards the troubled teen industry is what I found out the official name of it is, because you do have good camps. Like I've been to Bible camp and things like that.
Yeah, I've been to sleepaway camp. This is a little more talk about the discipline side.
Yeah, juvenile detention style camps, and you know the efficacies of those, some of the troubles and things that those things have been having. And I gotta say that this was an enlightening little rabbit hole for me to go down, because this is something that I'm experiencing within my own family, not personally my kids, but like my nephew and things like that. They discussed sending him to one of these camps, and so learning about this, I was like, I don't know if we want to do that, so we'll see.
Might want to take a look at some of these resources that we'll put in the link in the description before you send your kid to a camp.
Yeah.
Back in my late middle school, going into high school days, like I was kind of one of these like at-risk teens. I never quite made it to the go to a camp level. I went into ROTC in high school, and that kind of straightened me out. But I had a very close friend in 7th or 8th grade who got shipped off, and we're gonna talk about like recidivism rates and like how some people there's a more of a chance of them reoffending after these type of like boot camps or kid camps. And this was a case that was pretty close to me, where dude ended up going to lockup for a couple of years. I mean, he eventually got out and straightened his life around, but first experience with that, the first time somebody took him away was to one of these kid boot camps.
I'm glad you said that, because I kept reading that word and I do not know what that means.
Recidivism is a kind of like if you're addicted to something and then you get treatment and then you go back to being addicted, that would be recidivism. Like,
okay. Yeah. Like,
or like if you're sent to prison and then you get out and then you commit crime and go back to prison, that would be recidivism.
Yeah, they don't say like reoffenders. They say they call it a recidivism rate.
Yeah, that's a statistical term.
Recidivized?
I don't know the proper grammatical.
It's like I've only heard of that word in the context of like statistics, and it's always like a recidivism rate, or like that's exactly like I don't know if there is. You can look it up.
Well, one of my sources is a PDF that uses it extensively, which is why it kind of got stuck in my brain as like a descriptor for reoffenders.
Yeah, I read it and I was just like, all right, I'm gonna wait till John explains this to me. What the fuck recidivism means?
No need to like pull up dictionary.com right now or anything. You know, I'm just gonna breeze right by that.
We're gonna assume it means something.
I'm just gonna leave it blank in my underhand.
That's one of my favorite parts about the podcast, is I both get to educate and learn. You know,
yes,
it's one of my favorite things. But I also could have ended up in one of these camps, and I thought that was really interesting too, because you know I would like to open that up about like what kind of kids go to these camps, you know, and like
the ones that get caught.
Yeah,
exactly.
But I did not get caught.
Did not almost go to these camps at all. I went to a church camp.
Yeah, like to
just for
revise
funsies, right?
your behavior, though, or just
for funsies. Yeah, for funsies. I was on water slides and go-karts and shit.
Yeah, I did that camp too.
That's summer camp.
Yeah, summer camp.
This is detention.
I mean, technically, the camps that I'm going to talk about happen during summer too.
I feel
that's when most camps happen.
I feel that. No, these are like go live out there camps. You know, like you belong
I did hear
to
that
us
some
camps,
of them were like really long. Like I'm going to talk about fat camps, and none of them are really that long. Like the longest that I found was like 3 months for like the whole summer.
Yeah.
But I never saw any like like boarding school level.
I like fat camps because it's like on the very low extreme level of like a detention camp because
It's
you
like,
still
yeah.
don't want to go.
Well,
like,
it's-
kids aren't like, sign me up, I want to lose 40 pounds, mom.
Well, there are some. I'll talk about.
sure
there's
there are some.
an article from a woman who used to be a little girl that decided on her own to go to a fat camp. But I think that it still fits because it's like, I'd say 95 to 90% of the children at a fat camp have been sent there by their doctor or their parents or, whatever. But, yeah, I think that it's like, there's nobody like going like, I want to go to detention camp, like, you know, or like boot camp. Like nobody kid says that, obviously. But I think that fat camp still kind of applies because you mostly get sent there.
Yeah, it's a bit of it's a journey. They make you go on a journey the same way a military boot camp for kids makes you go on a journey. Same way like the one you're going to talk about is like a ranch style, which is a little bit different from the ones run by the legitimate like actual drill sergeants and army personnel.
Well, so they have different styles, right?
Yeah.
Like you have the wilderness camps, you can have the ranch style, boot camp, which is more military bent. You can have religious bent too, which is
they have conversion camps.
Oh, there's a lot of pray the gay away camps too. So, and that's what my point was really interesting to me when I first, like my first takeaway from this whole rabbit hole was like, yo, like it's weird how you can get caught, but it's not even really like that sometimes. It's just like, what if you're just doing things your parents don't like?
Oh, yeah.
You know, like I want to be out till 11. You want me home at 9. We disagree, but because we disagree, you might be like, you know what? Send your ass to boarding school, or something like that. Like this idea that if you're disobedient or if you are like, and there's just levels to that shit. There's levels to disobedience. There was a lot of stories of like kids getting sent to these camps because they're gay or something like that.
How about because your parent fucked up? In one of the instances that I watched, there was a kid, he was really tall, but he was very overweight. He was probably like 275 or something, but he was like 6'6". And he had just turned 18. He's 18 and a little bit of change. He was grown up. His mom put him in the military boot camp. And she put him in there because she said he's been addicted to video games and antisocial for years. And now they have a visit about 3 months into this camp where you get to see the mom interact with the son. And the son doesn't want to go back. But she's talking to him the whole time. You're going back tomorrow. Like it was like a little fun day with your parents. And she admits openly in that section where she's like, I was a drunk up until about 3 years ago. I used to be hammered all day, and my son's escape from my addiction was the video games. And he's standing right next to her, and he was like, I would just go in my room and put on my headphones and play my games to get away from it. And you could tell that this kid was pretty scarred, pretty traumatized from that. And it was, you talk about no fault of your own when you're a 13-year-old who's running away from a drunk mom and hiding in your room and playing video games. Like that doesn't really seem like his fault.
Video games are already cool enough,
Yeah.
but to be like having to go to them to run away from some shitty shit, like I can imagine why it would seem like, wow, this kid really just all he does is play video games. Like I wonder why that is.
Yeah, so the mom sticks you in a boot camp because, now that she's come out of this drunken haze and is sober, she's realizing like my child, I fucked up. My child is
Get off of this fucking shit.
Or you're playing Minecraft.
But you got a good point, man, because that was one thing I thought about too in some of these circumstances. Is like, I don't understand how this child has to go to one of these camps, which, we're going to lay out here that aren't always so pleasant because you sucked as a parent or neglected your responsibilities as a parent. And so you shipped them off to one of these establishments.
I watched multiple like documentary style videos of like kids, like following kids in through like the journey of the fat camp, and I promise you every single parent was extremely overweight.
I knew it.
Every single one. There was not one single parent that was there was a few that weren't like extremely overweight. There were a few that were like mildly overweight, like just regular, like normal weight people overweight. But some of them, man, like one girl's mom was like, she literally couldn't even stay in the camp because her mom was in the hospital. She went to the hospital while she was in camp, and she was like dying basically from like diabetes or something. And she couldn't even sit at the dinner table with her kid to eat dinner because like the interviewer even asked her, she was like, you gonna come sit over here? She was like, nah, those chairs are too rickety and, you know, like they're just not safe for me. And I could tell that I was like, man, she probably hasn't ever left this chair other than to like use the bathroom and
or scoot into a mobility scooter.
Yeah, like it's just like,
it's tough, man. It's tough to see.
Yeah, I didn't see any fit parents with fat kids.
Makes total sense to me. You know?
Oh, of course, yeah.
I got introduced to this idea through this chick here. As a lot of us know her. You know, this is Bhad Bhabie.
Famous,
She's famous as famous.
Danielle Bregoli.
Yeah, old
very
Danielle
famous.
Bregoli. Hey, Cash Me Outside, how about that? You know, so we all seen that clip. It's racked up like hundreds and hundreds of millions of views. And so she went on Dr. Phil when she was about 13 years old, and she was wilding, you know, like she was wilding. She was out of control behavior, driving, drinking, like partying, and she was quite offensive, I guess. You know, like she did seem like she was wilding. Of course, now, you know, listening to her story a little bit, she did say that they kind of make you play that up on the Dr. Phil show, which
Jerry Springer.
Yeah, it's kind of like
it's a
Jerry
TV
Springer
show.
Right,
People forget about that when it comes to Dr. Phil, because he seems like and from what I've heard, he's like a very, you know, straight, like I've heard regular podcasts with him, and he's like he seems exactly the same as he does on the show. But it is a TV show.
Right.
Like it's a business. They have to get ratings and shit. So I'm not surprised that the producers are like, yeah, we know that you're kind of like into hood rat shit. Is that correct?
Right,
She's like, yeah, I'd be doing some hood rat shit. And they're like, right. We want you to kind of lean into that a little bit when you're out there.
Yeah, it's,
I promise you that conversation happened. I promise you.
Yeah, she's like, how far?
Exactly
as far as you want to take it, Danielle.
Just, you know,
That's exactly how she described the conversation. So, you know, you got to understand, like you said, they're trying to pull ratings. But nonetheless, she goes on this show. And what Dr. Phil does, of course, he doesn't really help these kids. He showcases these cases like, look how wild it is out here. And then he like convinces them, like, you want to get help, right? And they're like, nah, not really. And he's like, you want to get help. And the parents are like, please help him.
Please help us, Dr. Phil.
And so he'll recommend that they get sent to one of these camps. And his camp of choice was Turnabout Ranch.
I'm sure there was no problems there. I'm sure that place was on the up and up. I'm sure there was sending troubled 13-year-olds to Turnabout Ranch sounds like a great idea.
And you know what? Like, honestly, though, until she said something to me on the surface as like a casual viewer of the show, I was like, yeah, send her to Turnabout Ranch. It's going to be good for her, you know? Learn some life lessons.
Scared straight.
Get some good quality, like, you know, lessons or whatever. So here it is years later. I mean, this is when she was 13. She goes to this ranch. I think she's out there for like a year or so, a couple months, right?
Goddamn.
Yeah. She comes home, she gets famous, she becomes a Bhad Bhabie, and now she decided, I think this was in, let me see when she posted this video. Oh, where's my details? So she comes out with this video like a year ago, and she's like, I'm breaking myself, like I'm going to tell all about these camps and stuff, because I guess a friend of hers had come out and said, yo, this camp's wildin', and some of the stories coming out of that camp was wild, dude.
Well, yeah. I wanted to say this earlier when you brought up the whole gay thing, but like, it's so interesting. Like these parents have this idea that like, oh yeah, to make sure that our kids don't continue to be gay, we're going to send them to a place where the amount of gay children their age vastly outnumbers straight adults, like 5 to 1. And that's going to turn out, with my child coming back, less gay.
We do the same thing with prison. You're a criminal? We're going to send you to criminal school.
Yeah.
And when you come back,
see
you better...
what kind of criminal you are.
Oh, that's too funny. It's true.
That's ridiculous.
No, I thought that too. I was like, you know, a bunch of kids that are all wild hanging out. I mean, they're pretty much going to encourage. But it doesn't really work like that from what I studied about the process of these schools. Matter of fact, I have a...
for teenagers due to the hormonal changes, as well as actions that stem from them becoming more autonomous and experimental, often by going against their parents. Some programs even let children in if parents don't agree with their sexual orientation, which is absolutely horrifying. The disciplinary methods are often portrayed as methods derived from a nostalgic and idyllic way of life, from tribal and spiritual, such as in the case of Aspen Achievement Academy, Academy, which is a wilderness therapy program, to strict cowboy-style education, such in the case of Turnabout Ranch. Often, the different programs follow the same pattern of therapy, as the program is broken into phases, while the child is stripped from all basic privileges and gains them slowly as they move up the phases due to good behavior.
Is where it
the
gets
first phase is usually one of complete isolation. The children are not allowed to communicate with one another and must stay in a small confined circle or territory. In the first phase, they can only consume specific and often flavorless foods, for example, nuts, dried granola, and raw broccoli in Aspen Achievement Academy, which calls their first phase mouse, or unflavored pasta or oatmeal cooked with only water in Turnabout Ranch, which calls their first phase impact. The second phase often includes activities that lead to physical exhaustion, for example, trekking in the wilderness from sunrise to sunset while carrying a heavy load in Aspen Achievement to working tirelessly around the ranch in Turnabout. The basic scheme of these programs is essentially isolation, physically exhausting occupational therapy, and reading emotional letters from the child's family when they get to an emotional breaking point. As they move...
So, I mean, to answer that whole thing about, like, yeah, they're going to you first get isolated, because I think that they understand that concept. So you're not allowed to interact with everybody until you've like shown that you're gonna play by the rules and you're gonna like conform. Once you start conforming, you can get a little, little tidbit.
Sounds very familiar.
Oh yeah.
Sounds a lot like boot camp.
100%. Yeah, red phase, blue phase, white phase, or whatever it was. Yeah, or red, white, blue. Yeah, but that was the same concept. Yeah, it's the same exact concept. So I mean, they got something into that to temper that whole bunch of criminal kids running amok, but I think you can see just from that how it can start getting a little sketchy.
Well, it leaves open, just from the outside looking in, that looks like you could abuse people in that. And like after hearing claims of abuse, it makes sense. You're isolating kids in tents in like the wilderness outside at night with no light. Like this seems like if these people were being predators on these children, predating. What's the verb? Preying. I was trying to say predatory.
I was like, what context?
These people are predatoring on these young people.
Recidivizing.
Yeah, they're recidivizing these children. But yeah, like Turnabout Ranch looks like someone would prey on children there. It's like it looks set up for that.
Yes.
Which is what's so fucked up about, like, at least with the boot camp ones, they're in barracks with bunk beds all lined up, so it's like all the children are together, like there's nobody like alone time where you could attack a child. But this is like designed for like let's put the child in the dark by themselves,
right?
Fucking 45 feet away. Yeah. It's crazy, man.
No, it is insane. And this is just outdoor in the wilderness. Like some of them use like actual isolation cells, like they'll throw you in a closet, like a janitor's closet essentially, and like quiet.
And the whole Turnabout Ranch thing seems weird because like they're just doing like ranch chores and stuff, and like
looks like slave labor.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like it just looks like manual labor punishment. Like that doesn't seem
chain gang.
Like at least at the fat camps, like the manual labor serves like a purpose directly related to, because that's one thing that's involved in all of these camps is manual labor. But at least in the fat camp, like it means something.
Yeah. Like
in these camps, like it's just like, you were bad, so we're gonna make you chop some wood, and it's like, for what? Like, it was
all I could think about was like a dog, and like if you want, they say a tired dog is a good dog.
It's true,
and so if you just work the fuck out of these kids, like they're a lot less likely to be out there wilding because they just don't have the energy, to like do anything. And I think, and it is punishment, obviously. Like that's why they make chain gangs in prison and stuff too, is they want it to be punishment. But at the same time, it is a good way to capitalize on some free labor, like
get some ranch chores.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if
somebody's got to scoop up that shit,
turning out some type of product or something.
They absolutely sell shit at that ranch.
I would not be surprised to find that out.
They sell making your child clean our ranch. Yeah. That's what they sell.
That's their main product. But then when you go to pick up your kids, they sell you peanut butter.
Yeah, they make candles.
They sell you.
We got some leather goods in the gift shop.
Take some shit down to the
milk
local
products or some
market.
Shit like that.
The kids just like doing dream catchers, crying.
You missed the goddamn red one, Susie. You missed the red one, and then you have to redo this whole fucking thing.
Holes. I totally didn't even think about
holes.
Wow, Shia LaBeouf was on it.
Yeah, well, we were like, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, yeah, that's what it'd be like.
Well, that's too damn big. You keep digging.
Because here's the interesting thing about this that I found out. These things are highly unregulated. Like,
yeah, nobody's over there.
we could open up a fat camp or a boot camp or a troubled youth teen thing right now.
The guy who ran the fat camp of one of the like I'll be honest, it was like one of the better like run organizations that I saw there, but he was like up on stage giving this talk, and he had this big like, you could tell he like really wanted to be like a college sports coach because he was dressed just like one, but he was like yelling at all these fat kids. and he had like one of the biggest beer guts I had ever seen. And I was like, bro,
oh my god,
come on, man. It's like you gotta be you gotta be on point. Like you gotta look at like, that's just bad optics.
Yeah.
This is a really good point, though, about credentials. I was watching something, and it was talking about like these two people that were bringing a case against one kind of these camp type things, one of these kid camps where they had been abused, and they had gathered up all these stories. They had like these lawsuits going, and they talked to a guy that used to work there, and they were like, "Did you know that anything was like going on?" And he was like, no, I didn't. Like he was, and they were like, "Well, how'd you get the job? Did you?" And he was like, "Well, I did not have a high school diploma. I had gotten my GED, and this is back when you used to look in the paper for ads. And I answered an ad to be a counselor, and I had no previous experience. What they said, what would your experience be with children up until that point? Zero, literal 0%. And he was one of the counselors who they had to literally have like therapy sessions with.
Right.
So this guy literally came off the street. GED,
100%,
and they put him in as a camp counselor.
Not that there's anything wrong with that with the GED thing.
No. I'm saying like,
but as a
where
camp
are you? Like you
exactly.
said, like they don't have no licensed psychologists on deck or anything like that.
The state board is coming in there and being like, "Oh, we got to check to see that these people know what the fuck they're talking about." Like,
dude,
nope.
even if you want to be a hairstylist, you gotta have some type of certificate on the wall that says like I'm licensed to do this. If you're just working the ranch, like they hire you as a ranch hand on the thing of the organization, but then later on they're like, "Oh, you can coach some kids too." Yeah, it's like, what, dude?
Yeah, we're gonna have I could see that happening. Like you've been working on this ranch for a few years, and you're just doing grunt labor, and then all of a sudden they start this program where they're gonna have this like kid thing going on. They're like, Jimmy, we want to talk to you.
You need to take over A group
next summer. We're gonna have like a group of like 10 or 15 children with you, and you do all of the like cotton picking and all that. And then he's just like, all right,
yeah.
It's your job,
and you just watch them and
just make sure one of them doesn't, get their hand chopped off in the gin.
Dude,
we're good to go.
I always thought the military boot camp ones would be more like ROTC in high school, where you have like a retired military personnel or something like that, or like like somebody who had done it previously but isn't currently active. Right. When I watched the one I watched, it was drill sergeants.
Yeah,
like active duty drill sergeants.
Active duty, like they had the hat, and these kids were coming off the bus like boot camp.
Yeah.
And they were getting treated like boot camp. They were like, they got uniforms at the end, like at the 3/4, like 2/3 mark when they got their uniforms, and that like, we could trust you with a uniform now. And they got their little name tags. They look like Ghostbusters. Yeah. I was like, what group is this? Y'all look like, yeah, they look like they're training to be like National Guardsmen for like the Coast Guard.
Facts.
I was like, I didn't understand. I was like, what? But these are like 16-year-olds and 15-year-olds, and you're dressing them up to play Army.
Like you said, it works though, because you stripped them all your individual beliefs.
It works while you're there.
Yeah.
It works while you're there.
Well, true. Because that's the interesting thing about the Army, as I thought about it too. I was looking at the boot camp stuff, and I was like, yeah, this is just like the Army. I made the comparison immediately. But then I also thought, I was like, yeah, but I signed up. Like I was like, I want to go into the Army. Might not have known what I was getting myself into or whatever, but I was like, hey, I would like this. And I also like to get paid for it, please. These kids just, like I said, your parents just be like, you know what? I'm tired of your bullshit. Really fucking with you.
I sobered up, and you play a lot of Minecraft.
You know what I mean? I ain't fucking with that.
I'm not fucking with that. Yeah, so I'm gonna need your ass to go to a military boot camp.
And you're like, I don't want to do that. And now you're stripped of all of that stuff, and you're stuck there, man. You're stuck there. Yeah. And that's wild to me. Like, that is almost like, I mean, and let's not say all camps are not like horrendous places, but
I'm sure there's some with great intentions.
There are, but you can see how it's set up, like I said, with the lack of accountability, the lack of oversight or whatever, not really hiring people who are certified or belong in those roles. And then when you also promote things like stripping people of their dignities and their things, like, right, like you isolation, like there's punishments in these camps, like if you don't follow the rules, you're punished. How are you punished?
Physical exertion.
You know,
what do you call it? Corporal
isolation. You know, or they can say like they'll just throw you in the shoe, which is essentially like solitary confinement. You know, for like up to like 24 hours and stuff. As like a 15-year-old, you know, that's crazy.
I mean, that kind of shit makes grown men go insane.
Right? Yeah. Like I tried it for 3 hours,
like with fully developed frontal cortexes and everything,
with my own thoughts for just 3 hours. And it was miserable.
This is why, like, you know, like we some of the shows that are really popular that talk about this stuff. We talk about Dr. Phil. One of the other ones is Scared Straight. Yeah, I know I've watched plenty of episodes of Scared Straight. It was like the A&E hit. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody fucked with it.
I love that show.
But now after doing a little bit of research, looking at, you know, some of the statistics and stuff, I don't think it's the best idea, man. I don't think it's the best idea. It just seems like it's almost like reality television. Like, I am sure that there are premises to reality TV shows that are like good for people, like the idea of like, oh yeah, we're gonna do like some speed dating or something. Like, people can find happiness in those ways, but when you take the reality TV lens and you put it on it, it becomes like this over dramatized kind of like theatrical thing. And with Scared Straight, like, if you wanted to take children in and show them the experience of prison
like,
in some
it's
way,
scary enough. Right?
Yeah, it's pretty scary, and I think you could do that in a way that's less
well, they just have all that faux threats of violence going on. And it's like, you could just have this dude sit down in front of these kids and just talk to them, like real straight up.
Instead of like, when you get in here, your ass is mine.
I'm going to destroy you. Just slapping the wall.
They have the wrestling promos for the children where it's like, yeah, I'm the baddest kid on the street. It's like, what?
Yeah, they like come doing like a flying people's elbow onto like another kid. He's like, yo, I'm Jimmy.
No, seriously, man. Tactics. That's an interesting conversation, because one of the things that I saw was this place called Sea-Doo, right? And like, it's interesting because this stuff's been going on since like way back in the day.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like
workhouses. You can go back to England,
50s and 60s and stuff, where they were doing these like boot camps and just different organizations. There was this one called Sea-Doo, CEDU. And it started out in California. They had this thing. It was called the Sea-Doo family. It was just opened by these two dudes who had like a lot of like ties to the Republican Party and things like that. Like, let's not get it twisted. But this was the same thing. They promoted themselves as a youth-oriented drug rehabilitation center run by former drug addicts, and all were rehabilitated by their Sea-Doo experience. But the interesting thing about so they're just like,
so how'd you get the first wave?
Yeah,
and then they went. But I guess they would do these things called like humiliation circles, where they would just grab everybody up and like berate them on like, this is why you're the biggest piece of shit on the planet.
Part of that tactic.
And everybody being like, yeah, you're a fucking crap. Don't be crap. If you want us to come in here and eat you up, essentially, like, you don't be a little piece of shit. And it's like, yo, that is not healthy.
There's lawsuits where they claim that some of these organizations will make you reenact trauma. So if you've been sexually abused, then in a group therapy session, they'll make you act out being abused again.
Right.
Which is insanity.
Right.
Like, that doesn't sound
like,
like,
I don't know if that, I don't know clinically how you're supposed to go about doing that, but it doesn't sound right.
You definitely don't get in a group with a bunch of kids and be like, fake rape me.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the answer.
That's not it.
I think that people misinterpreted maybe like early data that was coming out from studies where they were saying like, you know, sharing your experiences to other people might help relieve some of the traumatic feelings that you're holding on to. And so then some people who are like less credentialed than they should be to like fully understand what those studies were talking about came along, and they were like, oh, cool. So I could just have these like kids fake rape each other like they got raped, and then they'll feel fine.
It'll fix their problem.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like,
I could see that happening.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? So it's just creepy tactics like this. You know, they were doing the things depriving them of food sometimes, depriving them of like deciding what kind of music they can listen to and all that stuff, which makes sense to a certain extent. It was interesting that they brought up this. Now, she couldn't find, this is a source in this like article here on medium.com, which is an anonymous article written by somebody who supposedly went to one of these camps and stuff. But they had this flyer like back in the day, like somebody was going to do a discussion on it, and it was like, what Sea-Doo? The ad asks, Is it a hotbed of sex orgies or a haven towards decent living? And it's like, tune in tomorrow to find out, And it's like, obviously that's the headline, but you could see how things like that could happen. You know what I mean? Like, these kids was definitely fucking.
Advertisements back in the day were wild.
Oh, 100%.
That is wild, bro. Like, why even put that premise out there?
Sea-Doo. Well, they were probably trying to respond to it.
It says it was the television program that put out the ad because they had somebody from Sea-Doo on. So it's like the Tonight Show putting out
I don't know, just under there. George Cameron Stations, KDS. I guess maybe it's like a...
Yeah, it's a flyer for the show that they're going to...
Yeah, it said in the paragraph above it.
It said, you've read the headlines, now hear the facts, And then, but it was saying, like, this easy narrative can be found throughout the media, too, when Sea-Doo isn't sensationally misdescribed as a controversial home for social dropouts or a scandal-ridden boarding school or a now-shuttered behavioral school. It's dwindled down to a therapy camp with a hippie vibe, a retro eccentricity. Yeah. At Sea-Doo, Forbes observed in 2002, a 60s mindset still prevails. And so, I mean, they're just trying to do that hippie shit, like, which I get. But it's very culty, though.
We're turning
that's a little
troubled youths into, weed smoking dropouts.
Yeah, we're turning your troubled child into a liberal hippie communist.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is, like they were saying is, these guys under Sea-Doo would catch, like, a lot of flack. And then they would, like, have to shut this school down because there'd just be all this media heat on them and everything. But then they would just open up something called, like, Straight Ink or some other thing under some other, guys. And, again, this is back in, like, the 60s and 70s or whatever. They even said in there, the people who work the camp are graduates of the camp. Like, how does that make you qualified? Like, how does that make you qualified? It doesn't make you qualified at all, to be handling these types of things.
You point out that this was like, in the 60s, and I started thinking about something I haven't thought about in this conversation, which is like the wash houses and things like that in places like Scotland, Ireland, and in England. That would be where if you had a child out of wedlock, let's say you were a 15-year-old Scottish girl who got pregnant, instead of admitting that you got pregnant and having the baby and then still going to school, they would send you to like a home. And that home, you would have the baby would be taken from you and put up for adoption. Some of them, they'd be buried in the backyard. And those kids basically worked there until they were adults. It was like a punishment boarding school for mostly young girls. That was run by the Catholic Church, nuns.
God damn, it's like a twofer. They were like aborting children, and then they were getting like free labor.
And some of these schools, because they were washrooms. Yeah. So some of these schools make, they kind of push back against the dead children thing. But a lot of them, they've found, like the Canadian school was a famous one where they would take indigenous young Canadians and they would put them in these schools to basically like make them more like Canadianized. And there was a lot of claims of like, young children and babies being they would die maybe of a natural cause, but they were just buried in the backyard and never talk about it.
Right.
And that's...
who else has been accused of these actions? The Church of Scientology.
Wow.
Yeah. Within the Sea Org and stuff like that. Like there's strict rules. You're not supposed to have kids and all this stuff. If you do, they will take your baby from you and you keep working in the Sea Org and your baby goes to like the nursery. But the nursery conditions were very bad, and like you said, children would die, and it would be like just like died of natural causes type thing, and obviously this is just some of the accusations that have come out. There's no like ever hard evidence, of this stuff. Which
what's scary is like I if you think like, oh, this doesn't happen a lot, like look up the number of missing children every year just in America. It's in the millions. So it's kind of scary that like these schools are like you're talking about with Scientology and the Sea Org, like sometimes some of these wash schools and washrooms like in Europe. Yeah. And then, I mean, what happens when one of these kids goes away for a year? Yeah. And one of them gets pregnant in one of these camps or something like that. Like it's...
Or if they just run away. Like there were tons of, like even in some of the videos that I watched where one of the kids that the video was like following ran away. And it was just like... He just ran back home. He just went home. And they were like, oh, we can't find him, blah, blah, blah. And then like hours and hours later, his mom gets home from work and he's like there playing video games.
Dude.
And like, if let's just say you sent your child to somewhere that was like not where he could have just gotten a taxi back home. Now they just run away because they're like, I'm done with this bullshit. And they're just like in the middle of some other state. And now you've got like your 16-year-old is just like, well, fuck it. I'm not going home.
Yeah. Are you going to go back to parents who are going to send you back?
Yeah, like send you back. Yeah, like that'd be dumb. You're like, fuck it. I'm in Kansas. I'll just fucking do some shit in Kansas now.
Camp,
yeah, like I'm just going to do whatever now.
I want to make the point that I don't have
run away in the wilderness and just die.
I want to make the point that I don't have the answer for what to do with troubled teens. I wish I did have more of an answer for it. But after looking at militarized boot camps for children, I'm going to go ahead and say I don't think that those are the answer.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily... Fat camps don't seem like the worst idea. It's, talk about health and stuff like that. Like, I can see that having some good efficacy for a child. Now, conversion camps, I am diametrically opposed to that idea.
I think we should send the parents that want to send their kids to homosexuality conversion camps to like tolerance camps.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, just be like, hey, have a little bit of like, we'll send your kid to the gay conversion camp, but while he's gone, you're gonna go to this tolerance camp, so that way one of y'all can come back and be cool with what's
going on.
Same
with fat camp. If your parents are overweight, they gotta go too.
with you. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
for real. Because I mean, like, there's no way these 12-year-olds are gonna like lose a bunch of weight and then like have all this knowledge and motivation and then go home to their shitty parents with all the shitty food and the shitty habits and be like, no, Mom, I'm not going to eat the shit that you made tonight. I'm going to go to the grocery store and buy vegetables. It's not happening.
That's why 80% of people that come out of these militarized children boot camps, 80% of the kids go and make literally like within a week are back to reoffending and doing the same things they did previously. Yeah. Like it's like water off a duck's back when you get home and you're around your friends again.
Yeah. Because I read a little bit about the psychology of that too. It's because, everything is tied to these camps. So it's like your negative behavior is associated with these people and then they give you rewards. And it's just like anything else. You start playing the game, right? You're not really trying to get better. You're just, I just want better food.
You're better
so
at the game.
Better
play
food.
the,
You're just
I'm
trying to
play
get
the
through
game.
the whatever time frame you're going to be there.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So you're just playing the game, like do whatever I got to do to like check XYZ block. But when you come out, it's not like you have this enlightened experience of like, oh man, I learned so much. It's just like, hey, those people were fuckheads, and they made me like, they just essentially fucked me over,
A good point to that too is on the last day of camp, you'll see the Stockholm syndrome of them completely in love with their drill sergeants and completely in love with the camp counselors who've been, forcing them to do hard labor and all these things because you're in it for so long. You learn the reward system, so now you've convinced yourself that they're your friend, they're helping you. That drill sergeant is, your buddy.
You were making a distinction, and I do like this distinction too that we were talking about. It's not like all of these camps are this way though, right? I look at it kind of like religions or like a cult, like a cult as an idea is not necessarily a bad thing, right? When they start being like, let's drink the blood of each other and, like, let's sacrifice ourselves for the greater good.
Or I'm the only one that's allowed to have sex with the women in the cult type shit.
I am God.
Right. Like when they start taking it to those levels, then it becomes very dangerous and very bad, and same thing with these camps. I think there are camps that are well run with really good
intentions.
Qualified people with counselors on deck, with actual drill sergeants, and they have like an actual program that's been vetted by like psychologists and things like that to be like, this is a good, healthy program. And it might involve things like manual labor or whatever, right? Because those things can teach you valuable lessons. But I think that, like we were saying, there is a lot of room for that system to be abused. One that I was talking about with that same thing with the Sea Org and stuff and how there's no real data. One thing I thought about that Bhad Bhabie was talking about with this Turnabout Ranch place, they don't have no cell phones. They don't have no communication devices.
Ain't got no cameras either.
They got no cameras. They don't got nothing. So if something goes afoul, how do they relay that information?
You get your story straight.
But even then, you're fighting your own credibility. You're a troubled teen. You lie every day. Who's going to listen to you? You lie about where you're at when you leave your family.
Of course you think that the people at the camp suck.
Right? Of course you do. Yeah, because they're
trying to help you.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to help you. But it's like, no, they're diddling me.
You're sitting there. Yeah, you're like, no, he's raping me. And you're like, he
didn't rape you.
That's why this story has another layer of interesting like stuff in it. It's like you just showed me the little article that we can pull up where it's like the ranch that Bhad Bhabie went to. A kid tried to escape and killed someone and is now being charged with murder. But what's what's the real story? Like, do we know the real story? Like, if there's no cameras, if there's nobody on that kid's side, let's say, like, or a observer who doesn't have a dog in the fight,
right?
Then who's to say that that's what happened?
Yeah.
It's really tough when you don't have,
when there is no.
And, credit to the police that investigated. Like, hopefully they have enough evidence to actually charge this kid, and maybe he did do something like horribly, terribly wrong. But just reading the article, it seems like that kind of thing, like you said, if there's no cameras, there's no cell phones, there's no real witnesses, well then, who's to say?
Right. If it's all the counselors that are reaffirming these stories and stuff, and then the kids, like a lot of times are shunned or hidden away or whatever, or like, you better not talk or else it's going to be bad for everybody type shit. So, I mean, I think that they even had an incident like that in the movie Holes, where it's like something went afoul and the cops came and were like, what's going on around here? And they were like, nothing, it's fine. Yeah, and then all the kids are like sleeping, trying to like wink at them.
I think they were looking for the 2 guys that were missing.
Right, yeah.
Like, where's the parents showed up or something, and they were like looking for them, and they were like,
I vaguely remember it.
Never heard of those kids.
You see, and you could just see how things like this happen. That's what Bhad Bhabie was talking about. Like, you could see how young girls could be taken advantage of completely because, again, who's gonna tell this? Who's gonna back them up? Who's advocating for these people in this place?
If you go to my infograph, yeah, it's that one. Okay, scroll down. So number 3 there says girls who enter into a juvenile boot camp program are up to 5 times more likely to have a history of sexual or physical abuse. So now you're taking kids who are already victims, and you're putting them into a situation where they could be victimized. It's easier to victimize them. Like, you know what I'm saying? 100%. Like, a lot of this stuff happens from relatives and people like in their own home. Yeah. But you can imagine that if you are in the middle of the wilderness on a ranch in a tent by yourself, 25 feet away from everybody else, that seems like foul play could happen.
That's just because
looks like a hotbed.
Yeah, I mean, that's because the reason why it's most abuse comes from within family circles and stuff is because those are the people who have access. Those are people around. Yep. Like, believe it or not, it's really hard to get to somebody else's kids. Like, you just some stranger's kids. Like, it's extremely difficult to get to them. But your niece or your cousin's daughter or whatever, like, you know where she lives. Yeah. You know when he goes to work.
They'll let you babysit.
Yeah, like you're right there. So like that's why it's so much easier, and you'd be surprised like how many people are like that. Like, the numbers of how many people get like charged and like convicted are one thing. But that's just the people that get charged and convicted, you know what I mean? Like which is like a tiny, minuscule amount of the actual number. Not to mention the people who are like, just don't have the balls to actually diddle kids, but are just like into that shit and like watch kiddie porn and shit.
Yeah. It scares me when I see people that like have that look and they're around children. Yeah. Like I seen a video the other day. It was like, it was a vertical video. I was scrolling something. I don't remember if it was Instagram or TikTok or something. And they were clowning one of these refs at a girls' basketball game for like how old he was or something like that. But this guy just kind of had that look. And he's reffing the YMCA, 13-year-old girls basketball game. It's just like, I gotta start asking questions. I gotta do a background check at that point. Like it really does kind of scare you. Like I don't have children, but I would imagine if I had children, I'd be much more aware of this.
Dude, we're at the convention, whatever cosplay convention. It's an anime convention, right? Video games and things like that. Guy runs up to my kid. Now he doesn't look old, right? But he's like, maybe mid-20s or something. He's like, yo, can I take a picture of you guys, in your costume or whatever? And I'm like, okay. I'm having a hard time with this, because I'm like, this is my 12-year-old kid. You're an adult, and you just want to take a picture of my kid? Like, what are you going to do with this picture? Like, what is this, even? And to me, it's like awkward. Now, it's been happening all day, right? It's part of the culture. Let's take pictures together, blah, blah, blah. But he wanted to take pictures of them, and it was just creepy. Like you said, it was just creepy, and to me, I'm just like, I don't know. It's just like a weird interaction, I never had the experience.
Like I don't want.
Yeah,
like you said,
when somebody comes and puts their hands on like the kid's shoulders like that. It's like, hey, you doing it good today? It's like, yo, like they don't need all that. Yeah, they don't know you like that.
Their muscles haven't been, around long enough to be stressed and tensed out. They don't need.
I can see why people thought Joe Biden was
right 100%
because he's
super creepy. You're right.
I definitely think that they voiced over that video or whatever, but at the same time, he'd be creepy with the hands. you know, and the touching
and the
that
smelling
shit, and the looking. Yeah, it's all creepy. And so I could see a lot of that going down. I got some statistics for you too of just like what's popping. Rolling Stone put together this cool infographic video for us. Between 10,000 and 14,000 kids and teenagers are enrolled every year at a cost of about $100 a day. The whole troubled teen industry is taking in about $1.2 billion annually. In the past 15 years, there have been about 86 deaths of kids in these programs.
Wow.
86. Some due to like things like asphyxiation.
Yeah.
Like, here it is. Yeah. At least 10 kids have died at remote wilderness programs, the majority because of starvation, exposure to the elements, or pressing medical needs that went ignored.
That speaks to the people who run them.
Right.
Yeah.
In recent years, advocacy groups have collected thousands of police complaints from troubled teen facilities, including allegations of sexual abuse, forcible rape of a child, and battery and assault. 38 states and the District of Columbia have religious exemptions in their civil codes on child abuse or neglect.
Wow.
Advocates say the long-term solution is a federal legislation that would put the industry under a uniform standard, and that has been proposed twice by this congressman from California, George Miller, and would have banned programs from withholding food, water, and medical care under the guise of discipline or therapy, and reserving the use of handcuffs, shackles, and other physical restraints for emergencies, and neither bill passed. So, I mean, this is... It's out there, you know what I mean? Like I said, this is happening. I don't know if it's like a epidemic. I mean, 14,000 kids, about 86 dead, and
that's a rough percentage.
Right.
That's a rough
percentage. It's kind of like what Mac was talking about earlier with the amount of people who've been charged with diddling kids and the amount of kids w'ho've been diddled is like, there's a great, like a huge disparity there. And I would say that same is for this too. It's like, because like a lot of these kids don't talk about this stuff. They don't really have anywhere to talk about this stuff. Or like, even then, dude, oh my gosh, man, Bhad Bhabie put out that video, right, and goes at Dr. Phil and it's like, why are you sending people to like this place that's super fucked up? And then his response was like almost comical, bro. Like almost comical. He's like, well, I mean, we don't really have any system for reporting back and forth with this. I'll just play it for you guys.
What?
He's like, he pretty much just says,
I have a system.
Right. He said, once they go to the ranch, it's like out of my hands. I don't know anything about what happens.
We just recommend this ranch.
Right. And I'm like, yo, you're tripping. Like,
welcome back to Banfield. My guest for the hour, the inimitable Dr. Phil McGraw. So, Phil, I'm reading the New York Post this weekend. I open up this story about a teen rapper named Bhad Bhabie, B-H-A.
She called her out too. She was like, "You know how to say my fucking name, bitch." She's like, "Your kids listen to me. Your fucking husband probably knows who I am. Don't sit here and act like you don't know how to say my name."
I'm going to handle it my own way. She says that I was on his show 5 years ago, and I was recommended to go off to this boot camp, and they were abusive at this boot camp. I want to play this, the soundbite from your show, so everybody knows who this person is and what she was like at 13 years old. Her mom brought her on the show to say, I can't handle her anymore. So here's that moment.
The premise is she deserves this. Let me show you
why.
why.
Of course.
Funny. She's talking about the audience.
Bhad Bhabie's response was really great to this too. She's like, why not show my multiple platinum records? Where's my gold platinum? All the things I did that was amazing. Instead, you're going to show my Cash Me Outside clip. Okay.
Not sure how I would have handled that 13-year-old if she were my 13-year-old. But let's talk about her and what she's now doing in her accusations. She says that the place that she was recommended to go was abusive to her, wouldn't let her sleep. What are your responses?
She also calls out the fact that she's like, oh, that's all I said is they wouldn't let me sleep. She was like, what about the murder? What about girls talking about getting touched? All this other stuff. It was more than just they wouldn't let me sleep.
Well, she went to Turnabout 4 or 5 years ago, and if she had a bad experience, obviously I would hate that. We'd be sorry about that. But We don't have anything to do with what happens with guests once they leave the stage. I mean, that's between the guardian and the parent and whatever facility they go to. So we're not involved in that. We don't have any feedback from them. So whatever happens once they're there, that's between them and the facility. I assume she had a problem. She filed a complaint with the proper authorities or something 5 years ago. So I really don't know much about it.
It's a very Travis Scott response. He said,
Wash my hands out. Like, hey,
people died in the crowd. I had no idea.
Dude, 100%.
Nothing to do with Turnabout Ranch.
Bhad Bhabie calls it out, though, because in one of the forms that they signed a release of information to send actual progress reports and updates from her, like from the ranch back to Dr. Phil. So they determined that was a lie. And then they also, she brought up another good point. She's like, I've raked in more money for your show than she's the most viral thing to ever come out of the Dr. Phil show.
Oh, yeah.
Racked up hundreds of millions of views on the show itself, not to mention clips on his YouTube channel, made him probably upwards of $80 million, and you don't.
I mean, how many times do you think Dr. Phil's
happening.
been on TV extra to talk about this chick?
Exactly. That's what she was like, and she pulled up clips of him talk like show after show. She's like, almost every interview you do, I get brought up, but you don't know. You didn't keep up with what happened. Like,
I mean, maybe 4 years ago when she was,
yeah, 100%.
I will say, I'm not like defending Dr. Phil or whatever, but I will say that I agree with his last statement, which is, if there was some really like heinous shit that went down, she really should have filed some sort of like a legal thing at the time, which is totally true.
Yeah.
Like that's something that I just feel like happens a lot in these areas. Like, and I know it's like tough to like talk about it and everything, but like we need to get past that. Otherwise, shit ain't gonna get done about it. Because if you don't tell anybody when it happens, we can't do anything about it 30 years later.
Slight pushback to that.
Yes,
you're asking a 13-year-old girl who is supposedly a victim of something to like speak up, and it's like I've gone back and forth on this personally a lot and thought about it a lot, and I still don't really know how I feel about this, but because there is the factor of like if you do not speak up, will that person continue to offend? Like, have you a responsibility to say something? And that's really tough because now you get into the realm of victim blaming. This is a very murky water. And so I see your point. And I also
it
see...
didn't have anything to do with that, like victim blaming or saying that they have some sort of responsibility. I was just saying that if we want something to happen...
Right.
For these situations, I'm not saying that it's not like a difficult thing, but we need to start communicating to children and making it like the known thing about these scenarios that you have to talk about it. Like it's hard and it's going to be tough, but you have to say something because if you don't, then nothing happens.
Yes.
And they might do it again. Not saying that would be your fault, but wouldn't it be nice if you said something and then we caught him and he didn't do it again? Like that would be nice.
I can empathize more on this topic with adults, who have
for sure with adults,
gained more understanding of the world and have hopefully claimed their own personal power and voice more. Whereas like a 12 or a 13-year-old, they're still trying to really, they don't have any power. Like shit, they just got shipped off to a camp. So it's like, like the idea that they can feel like I can speak out or something like that without repercussion.
Fear of repercussion is
like
a big thing too. Yeah.
Well, then that's our fault.
100%. I agree. But I mean, so that's what I'm saying. To say like you should talk about it, it's tough for me to put that responsibility on the kid, right? But like,
well, then
in other
circumstances
make a
where I've seen scenario where they feel comfortable doing that thing.
Yeah, I feel that. Like I definitely do that for my kid, right? All the time. Like, yo, if there's
something must be
going
said.
on. You tell me. At least,
pay attention as well. Like, there's a lot of things we can do as adults to help make it okay for children who have been abused. But it's just such a very tough. It's a tough conversation.
What if the parent doesn't even believe her? Who's gonna take her down to the police station to file the police report?
Yeah, let's say you're getting abused by your uncle, and you go to somebody. Hey, my uncle's abused me. Your uncle's a great guy. He would never do that.
Right.
You're. It's tough, man.
It is.
It's tough.
It is. So I mean, I get what you're saying from an effectiveness standpoint, and I guess that's kind of what Dr. Phil is saying too. It's like, hey, don't come at me. Like, you know what I mean? That's between them and the cops. If she has a problem, they need to bring up to the cops. I can't do nothing about it, right? And I get that. Throw your hands up. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, that's a
if your show is sending kids,
I don't like him using that message to wash his hands of the situation. But I felt like I needed to point out the fact that that's an extremely important message that
doesn't
almost nobody talks about, because they're like, well, you can't force children to talk about traumatic things. And I'm like, I feel you. I understand what you're saying. But then we're just accepting that there's nothing's going to be done about this. Like, I mean, like you said, you bring up a lot of good points about why children feel like they can't say those things. But then all the more reason that we need to be pronouncing this message, because then it's even easier to solve because it's on the adults. If the adults create environments where their children can say something to them when it comes to situations like this, then something can happen.
Which is why I kind of feel scummy about Dr. Phil. Because Dr. Phil is kind of saying here, yes, I sent her to this camp. Yes, I partnered with them. Yes, that we fully support that camp. But if something happened there, that's between the camp and her.
Yeah,
and it's like, Dr. Phil,
you were part of that love triangle the whole time.
You were there, dude. Your cameras were there, dude.
You know what I'm saying?
Like,
you got like at the end of every show, and they're like, and what did our contestant win?
Yeah.
A trip to Turnabout Ranch. Yeah. Look at them beautiful amenities. They get unflavored
and then somebody's like, Turnabout Ranch is raping people. Well, we didn't
You should call Turnabout Ranch about that.
That's between them and Turnabout Ranch.
I didn't read that in the brochure.
We just send children to them. We don't ask what they do to them later.
Oh my God.
100%.
Like, what kind of an answer is that?
I'm just like, yo, that's sketch. Because that was my takeaway from that, like this whole thing. And I looked at it. I was like, all right, camps, that's fine. Kid camps, fat camps, whatever, camps. You're going to send your kid to camp. I don't give a fuck. To me, I'm like looking at it, I'm like, if I had my kid, I'm going to charge the responsibility of my child with a stranger, somebody I don't know. I'm going to keep an eye out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to check up. I'm going to call. I might show up unannounced.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't help but, I was talking to Jessica about this, I couldn't help but think of, like, Happy Gilmore. I was like, nursing homes be a lot like this, too.
Yep.
Like, nursing homes be a lot just like this. You got great nursing homes out there. Take beautiful care. Better care of your fucking
parents than you ever would.
Than they did.
Yeah.
They took care of themselves. But then there's these other ones that just might leave your grandma laying in a puddle of piss for fucking 2.5
Same goes for daycares
days, you know? So I'm like,
yeah.
if you're gonna leverage one of these things, make sure you're keeping strict accountability to these people, because you don't know these people and what's going on.
I mean, this is basically the argument that I was talking about in our episode when we talked about the whole Texas freeze and ERCOT and the Paradise fires. Check that out. I don't remember exactly what number that was.
But Dan knows a good episode.
Yeah, you can see it. It's in the card right up here.
Yep.
But I was making the argument that, like, the fact that we think that we take it for granted that we're giving these responsibilities to other people. You know what I mean? Like, when you phrase it like that, like, you are responsible for your own well-being first and foremost. Like, you can't say that anybody else is, because that would make no sense. So then when you start saying, okay, well then what are things that I need for my well-being? Well, I need to be, warm when it's cold outside. But you give the responsibility to someone who's more capable than you, or at least that's what they're supposed to be. But you can't just take it for their word that they're more capable, or maybe even like one or two references on their website. Like, well, look at their reviews on their website. It's their website. They're not going to put negative reviews on their website. Yes. You got to ask other people. Like, I try to find the negative reviews about things and see how bad they are. Like, if the most negative reviews about a product or a service are like, yeah, like it wasn't quite as big as I thought it was going to be from the pictures, or, like something like that, or like, oh yeah, they weren't quite as thorough as I thought they were going to be, but all in all, they did a good job. Yeah. Like, that's a good product or service.
This is my recruiter joke that I came up with after being recruited into the military. I used to always talk about, like, I remember the day I came up with the joke, and I'm mopping a hangar floor. It's like a Boeing 747 size hangar floor, and I'm just with one mop, just
one guy,
the whole thing. And I remember
not like an electric
it's
mop.
Me and the battle buddy, so it's just like me and John Allen, proverbially. He wasn't there, but we're just mopping. And I remember saying to my friend, I was like, yep, this wasn't in the brochure.
Yeah, nah.
And then I was like, from now on, anytime I ever get into a job or a scenario or something, I was like, tell me the bad shit, the worst shit. Because in that recruiter office, they're like, oh man, showing me helicopters flying and shit blowing up and like all this cool shit, which there was like some of that, but I was like,
you heard a lot more of that than you actually got to experience.
So my point was, I was like, the good shit, you're gonna love it. You don't need to hear about how great things are. Yeah. When it's great, it's gonna be amazing.
It doesn't really matter what it's gonna be.
I'm gonna have to trudge through the shit to get to the good, and I want to know how deep is the shit that I'm trudging in comparison to this good nugget I'm looking for.
With this army analogy, right? Most people come out the other side of the army and live successful lives. You would say, probably. There's a higher homelessness rate and things like that, but if you want to look at like median income of veterans compared to people who don't go into the service, you might see an upward tick or discipline, lack of like a less DUI maybe or something like that. The point just being like, if you look at like offending, right, like the recidivism rate that we were talking about, what is it, 10 to 15,000 kids a year go into these camps? Yeah. In Ohio, 4% of them see an overall like better, like they don't reoffend.
Right.
4% in Ohio. 96% of the children who go into these military boot camps in Ohio go right back to doing the same exact thing, reoffend.
Wow. It's the same for the fat camps.
Yeah, so it's like if you have a 4% success rate.
Wow.
How the fuck is that acceptable as an industry? Yeah. An industry that's growing and makes billions of dollars a year.
100%.
4%.
If I had an insurance policy that only covered me for 4% of the things that happened in Ohio,
I would stop paying for that insurance policy.
I would stop paying for that immediately.
If that insurance policy sexually assaulted my child, I would immediately
I can't with that one, dude. That's the end of today's show. Oh my gosh, too funny, bro. I'm crying. No, really though. But
that's a bad insurance policy.
Yeah, it is.
It's totally
terrible. 4% success rate. I did see that the recidivism.
Yeah.
Yep, rate was high.
The rate of reoffense.
Yeah, it's like really
96% in Ohio for children.
I did see that.
When it comes to fat camps, like I was kind of like, I was a little bit like optimistic about it because everything that I read about it was talking mostly like it was either experiences from adults who would have been children in like the 80s and 90s or they would have been children in like the 80s and 90s, or it was kids from today, and it was like more positive. Like the videos that I watched were all mostly, and this is something that I wanted to bring up earlier, but like we touched a lot about like the ways that the adults in the scenario could abuse the children, but we didn't really touch on where most of the abuse in these scenarios comes from, which is from the other children.
That's true.
Because this was the number one thing in fat camp was the abuse from other children, especially in today's fat camps. Like obviously there was a lot more abuse coming from the adults and like harsh tactics in like the older fat camps, like super like bad food, even though it was supposed to be like healthy. It was just actually like just crap, like really cheap. And like people that didn't really know what they were talking about. No discussion about like body positivity or like psychology around food or anything like that. It was just like, you're going to be working out a lot and you're going to eat shit food and you're going to eat a little bit of it.
Right.
And so they're getting better for sure, but the abuse that comes from the other kids was like the number one reason why people were having a bad time at the camps.
So there's fat kids calling other fat kids at fat camp fat?
They're calling them fat. They're calling them stupid, ugly. Like they're just calling them all the things that kids call each other, you know? Like the fattest kids at the camp get made fun of by the thinner kids. Yeah. Like for being fatter. 100%. Like 100%. Weird. And even though they're all at fat camp,
you know what I mean? But like,
so like everybody's at least a little bit fat.
That's what happens when you give them the stick. You know what I mean? Like you've been getting beat with the stick, and then you give them the stick, and they're like, "Oh, now it's my turn to beat the fuck out of."
Classic tribalism too.
Yeah,
pick out the weakest.
Yeah, that's true.
And so it's like,
that's true.
That has to be talked about too, because I think that nobody likes talking about how like savage little kids are. You know what I mean? Just because they haven't been like they don't understand like the social cues and like how we get along as a society. Like we all keep that shit to ourselves. You know what I mean? Or like tell your buddies, but you don't tell the person that you're making fun of when you make fun of them when you're an adult. Like you understand that because everybody makes fun of people. Like it's not like, like we're adults here.
Everyone loves a good roast.
Everybody loves a good roast. So it's like, I'm not telling you not to roast. Yeah. And so like,
I just don't want to make somebody self-conscious in the process.
Yeah. I would never but I don't roast people to their faces. Like there's no need to tell them that.
Yeah, intentionally hurting people's feelings isn't as funny as
really
roasting
fun.
them.
Yeah. It's not the same. Yeah. It's like, that's a totally different action. So we need to be more attentive to the children, and also like more attentive. Like there used to be sort of a self-correcting thing going on with kids. I remember like back in the day, like I used to be picked on by people that a few years later were like my best friends. You know, like somehow like we all just kind of like worked it out over the years of being around each other. Maybe that's just with exposure.
Was that more like hazing then though?
Hazing, maybe that's just more like hazing rather than like full blown like ostracization. But you know, like I think that there's just like we don't talk about like bullying is seen as like this like funny thing to talk about, like, oh, like you're gonna like argue about bullying, but it's like it doesn't affect all the kids, but some kids it really affects them like
big
hard.
Deal out here these days.
Yeah, like it could really do some damage, and especially if it's like you go to a camp. Like there was a kid in one of these videos that was there specifically, like he went there himself, but then left because he was getting made fun of too much. And it was just like too much for him. And so like he was actively trying to better himself, taking steps. And then he goes to this place to do that. And then because of the ridicule from the other kids, he was like, oh, you know what? Maybe not. And
it's
so
heartbreaking,
he went back.
man. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And when they talked to, you know, like they did little like checkups later, like 6 months later, he hadn't like stuck with anything that he was learning at the camp.
Yeah. Are these fat camps, are they like boot campish in nature, or are they fun?
They're more like a summer camp.
They're more like a summer camp. Like the new ones are way better. Like they have, it's like less, there's still lots of activities, but like now there's like in-class learning and stuff. So like they'll talk about nutrition, or they'll talk about like psychology stuff, and like self-esteem classes and stuff like that, like confidence classes, and it's all like, they're not doing like manual labor, you know, like they're playing sports, they're swimming, you know, like they're hiking, you know, like they're doing all kinds of like fun activities
that are physical,
that are just physical. Yeah. And so, and then, you know, like they're eating like the one place, like probably the best place that I saw was actually really interesting, because they were taking like a full blown like holistic approach. And they were even like, they set up a day where they would go out to a McDonald's. And like they partnered with McDonald's, where McDonald's would provide the meals and everything. So like, which of course, why would they not? But they go to McDonald's because they were like, you know, we've had some parents kind of like push back on us about taking the kids to McDonald's, but they take them, then they're like, look, this is, and they calculate how many calories each kid should have based on like their height and their weight and their age. And they're like, this is how many calories you're allowed to have at McDonald's. Pick whatever you want. Yeah. And some kids picked burgers and fries, and all they ate was burgers and fries. And they had a little cup of water next to them. Some kids were like, oh, I'm going to get a salad or like a chicken wrap, and then get like some sides, you know, like maybe I'll get a soda. Like one kid was like, I'm just going to eat salad and apples, and I'm going to eat like a big fudge sundae. And so, and the guy was like, you know, if we don't prepare them for the real world that they're experiencing out there, then we will have failed them. And we won't be giving them what the parents paid for. So he was like, for us, and this was one in Britain, I think. And so he's like, for us, it's like very important that we have the McDonald's trip, because it shows them like, look, just because
healthy people eat McDonald's too.
Just because you're gonna go with your friends to McDonald's does not mean that you have to eat like shit. Right. And they also say like, and it's okay to eat like shit every once in a while if you normally eat well. And so I was like, yo, like they're definitely coming up. Like a fat camp, do some like major research and like go down there maybe a couple of times before you put your kid in there to like make sure that they're like got qualified people.
Yeah, but I'd be sketched if the counselor I meet is fat.
Yeah, dude, the guy that ran this one had a big old beer belly, and I was like, bro, you can't
unless he
do
has
that.
something like, you know, he's gonna be like, yo, I got a disorder or something.
No, it was total
like,
dad bod.
But
dad
like,
bod
if it's
vibes.
just like you just don't work out and you don't eat, like how are you running? And do they call them fat camps, by the way?
Yes.
They call them fat camps.
Oh, interesting.
I want
The
to
kids call them fat camps.
Interesting.
I want to point this out. You talked about the programs within it, right? The different characteristics of the program. So I was reading one of these like studies. It's like the Jerry Lee Foundation or something. So it was like the people who funded it were people who were like helping troubled youth. And so they studied the boot camps, put out a research paper. And one of the things it talks about, it says, dominant features of boot camps are physical exercise, military drill, and ceremony, all carried out in the context of strict discipline. Descriptions of the rehabilitative component of the boot camps were seriously lacking in most reports. A particular treatment component, such as drug treatment, was coded as present if the written report made any mention of that treatment component. We were unable to identify the quality of the components based on the descriptions given. based of the program characteristics examined, only counseling as an integral component of the boot camp program were appreciably related to the odds ratio. So it was like if you had a rehabilitative program like counseling, it was better for your program. There was less recidivism, but the majority of them did not.
Didn't have
studies.
anything. Yeah,
they had literal nothing. It was just you go to boot camp, you listen to the drill instructors, and then you go home after whatever the determined period
work
is.
You out for a while.
So if you have any sort of mental health issues, if you are on the autism scale, if you have an eating disorder, if you have a learning disorder, anything like that, you're not going to see any sort of help or no one's going to tailor a boot camp for you. You just have to survive.
Yeah.
And as a 12 or a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old who has some of these problems, being shoved into one of these programs that aren't tailored to you specifically, I can't imagine how difficult that must be.
Yeah. Agree.
Because it was difficult as an adult. As an 18-year-old man who went to boot camp, it was fucking difficult.
Yeah.
They break you down physically and mentally. I was a different person. I literally, when I was thinking about these boot camps for kids, right, I started thinking about my own experience in a boot camp. I started thinking about the things that the Army trained me. Like, they break you down and they retrain you. And I have this distinct memory of putting a bayonet on my rifle, right? Affixing a bayonet. And the guy standing up on like a wooden platform talking to all of us as we were learning how to stab our enemy in the heart. And he was like getting us to chant. And he was like, "What makes the green grass grow?" And we were supposed to yell, "Blood! Blood makes the green grass grow!" And I was like, you're literally teaching... And it's like, and like, I understand the idea of like war and that's your enemy, but that's a human. So you're telling me like, just kill humans. It's fine if they look like the enemy.
Actually beneficial.
It's so good for you to kill them. And so like, we're out in the
our
woods.
Planet.
Yeah, we're out in the woods running up to a green dummy going, "No!" and stabbing kill. And like, that's supposed to be a human. You know? Like that's
a human-shaped dummy.
That's a human-shaped dummy. It's strange. Like, if as an 18-year-old man, I mean, I'm still forming my cortex at that time, but still, you take me back to being 13 and how impressionable I was at 13 or 14, and you put me through something like that, I come out the other side ready to be a school shooter.
Right.
I can see that.
Like, you are just literally pumping violence into a 13-year-old's brain who's already playing Fortnite. He's already landing at the school, getting the scar and killing all his buddies. And now you're just like, you want to know how to do it in the real world?
Let me send you to fucking physical training camp.
Let me get you ready for the real.
I would assume that they don't do the kill drill in the kid camp, but we don't know what drills they're doing. So it's just like, it's hard to say. You know, because like I said, none of that, all that, the day-to-days of exactly what their curriculum is not presented, I think, in a lot of this. Like they said, they're just like manual labor. Like what though? Like how much? How often? What are the water break situations like? Like, you know, like what's the work to rest ratio? You know, like all that stuff, you know?
What are you having them memorize? We had to memorize like no fallen comrade left behind, like all these other like credos and mottos and things. What are those kids memorizing?
Yeah. When they send you on they strap you up with this pack and they take you on these walks, you know, like how long is the walk? And like, is there some type of scale
ratioed out based on the size of the child? Because there was that little girl, and she looked like she had the same size pack as the fat kid in front of her. And I was like, there's no way in any real life scenario that an experienced wilderness person would put the same amount of weight on these two children.
You could be destroying that child's like knees. You could be destroying their like spine.
Now, luckily, they are children, so like their knees and their spine have a little bit more like snapbackery to them.
we could really break down the lowest part of their spine.
If you're gonna do any sort of like physical abuse of your body, a child is probably the best time to do it. But that being said, there's still like rules of safety and things like that that should be adhered. You know, you really only want to break them when it's like life or death.
But you guys said you've been. I feel like me and you went to the same camp for some reason because you talked about the water slides and the go-karts and all that stuff and like.
Yeah, like every night after dinner, they would bring us all into like the auditorium. And they'd have like Bible study or whatever.
Because we went to, I went to Bible camp, which was like a summer Christian camp. You know?
It's a summer camp, kind of like loosely centered around the Bible.
Yeah. And yeah, that's what it was. It was like, you know, I remember it was a long time ago now, but I remember, you'd wake up, you'd go have breakfast at the chow hall, and then we'd have to go do like mass or whatever, like,
some sort of religious thing.
Yeah, some like
ceremony or whatever.
Small group or large, whatever. And so we do the thing. And I remember I'd just be sitting there the whole time like, God, I can't wait to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, as soon as they open those water slides, you'd be thinking to yourself, like, what I'm about to get first.
Like, I'm about to run straight to the water slide.
Is there a concession stand where you could, like, buy shit from? I remember you, like, bought all your own meals there at the one that I went to. And so, like, your parents had to send you there with money.
Yeah.
And I remember they had, like it wasn't, like, good quality, but, like, you were just buying burgers, and I remember they had like candies and shit, and I was like, bro, this is the best camp ever.
Yeah, like I had a blast.
That was amazing.
Like,
you guys are so flooding my memories right now. Like I've got good ones, I've got bad ones.
There's nostalgia just dripping off.
I'm only gonna share you one. I went to a camp called Camp Berger or something like that. Yeah. Like I've been to day camps, I've been to overnight camps. This was the first like big camp experience for me where I stayed the night. Right, like later on in my life, I did a lot of day camps where we're like adventure camps. But this was my first sleepover camp. I remember it distinctly. I remember it was the summer that Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden came out, because one of my camp counselors, who I thought was the coolest dude in the world, would sing the song, and I was like, he'd be like, Black Hole Sun, and like I'd get all excited, because I was really into music at that age or whatever. I was very impressionable. I was young. I don't know how young, but I was young. I have this distinct memory of, it was like the last night or the night before the last night. It might have been like one night to the last night. I, for the only time in my entire life, peed the bed.
Yeah.
Never done it before in my entire life. Wow. And I remember the dream. The dream was my mom was dating this dude from like Iran or Saudi Arabia. His name was Shahadi, and he was this really cool guy. He had all this cool modern furniture and laser discs at his house. Yeah. And so I was
This is a real dude?
Real dude.
Oh, okay.
I'm in the dream.
That's a lot of detail.
I'm in the dream. I'm at Shahadi's house. He has this giant sectional couch, and I'm like, shit, I got to pee really bad. And he's like, oh, you just pee right there. Yeah. And there was a toilet in the couch. Yeah. And all I had to do was just go pee in the corner of the couch in this dream. So in the dream, I'm just peeing in the couch, and then I wake up, and I realize I'm peeing on a bunk bed, on the top bunk, above somebody else. And so I panic, right? I just panic. I pee even more. I just like peeing everywhere now. And it's like nighttime, right? Yeah. So, or it's like just starting to be the morning and nobody's awake yet. Yeah. So I just gather all my linens and I just run out to the trash and I just dump these fucking things in the trash. And I just go back. I just lay in the pee mattress and I'm just not going to tell anybody. Yep. And then like a day goes by and it comes to that night and one of the counselors pulls me aside and he's like, go up to the office and go ahead and get a set of linens. And so he like took me under his wing and was like, it's okay, little pee pants. Go get you some linens. And I remember him distinctly being like, next time though, you need to let us know. Like he was like, I understand and I feel for you, but that's not the right answer.
Way to go about
and it was a good life lesson. It was a great life lesson. So yeah.
That when you pee your pants, you need to speak up.
You need to admit to it.
You need to say something.
Or throw them in the trash and hide it from everyone. Which is what I did, and it didn't. It worked out for me.
I mean, don't you see the comparison here between the point I was trying to make and the voicing of the pee?
Yep.
But I also know that 11-year-old me is throwing all my shit in the trash.
The shame that I felt.
I just can't. It was hard enough going to my own mom because I was a bedwetter. You know what I mean? So it was hard enough just going to my mom and being like, I peed the bed again.
But now you're going to your male hero who's like 7 years older than you and cooler than your brother.
And there's like 70 other kids there. We're going to have a circle jerk around the fire later. And I don't want them all looking at me like,
that's pee pants, kid.
Seen that. Yep. Smelt it last night.
I smelt it. It dripped on me. I was underneath you. Yeah.
Oh man, but hey,
overall, shake that trauma off, baby.
Overall, positive experiences at camp, man. Like I had a good time at my camp. I don't remember any fuck shit.
This is the thing though, because when I looked at this is funny. This article that you happen to be on right now is like from a blog written by this woman, and she talks about when she went to camp back in like the 80s or whatever. And it was bad. Like her whole thing is like, I'm a fat camp survivor, and she had a bad experience there. From her description, it sounds like she's like a sensitive woman, and so it was just a little bit like not. She talks about these fat affirmative camps. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but it's where like fat people come together to be like positive about being fat.
Interesting.
Never heard of that before. No. But
affirmative tactical camp.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but like the name of this website and the way that this, like the tone of this woman as she was speaking, something compelled me. I was like, I wonder if she's got a picture of herself at the top of this. And she does at the top of the article. You can go to her Instagram or her Twitter page. Mm-hmm. And I promise you, son, she is mad fat.
Yeah, of course.
Super fat, way fatter than she described herself as 15 and chunky. She is like obese now.
She survived fat camp, all right.
Yeah, she survived it and didn't ever go back.
Turned into a cat lady.
I love
not that I'm not trying to show this woman, but like it's just, she's like complaining about the fat camp and then she got out. But the reason why it was interesting was because in the article she talked about how the negatives that she had was all of these negative framings that the camp was like putting on her, like the food restrictions and like making sure you don't eat more calories than you're supposed to and you're not allowed to have these. And she was like, all of the psychological things that they tried to implement to help me just totally fucked me up. And like, I don't know, like I guess she just like rebelled against them and just went full blown super fat woman. I don't know, but
the tone of this website is hilarious. I just want to point that out. Read the article titles on the right hand side. These are some of my favorite. Running away from home at 15 helped me find a home within myself.
It's some sort of like a blog.
We all liked problematic stuff as kids, but we don't have to pass them on. Don't watch Ninja Turtles. They're racist.
Yeah.
Here's this one. Is it because I'm fat? How internalized shame impacts intimacy. Like they're like, I get the idea for these articles, right?
Yeah.
Like we all get it, but like the tones are just really funny.
Yeah.
Well, and the name of the art, like the name of the site too, it says ravishly, and I'm like, okay. Like I don't know, like you said, like you could just hear it in the tone and everything. Like it's a vibe.
I can't place it.
There was a vibe, and the vibe screamed. Fat woman wrote this article, complaining about her fat camp experience.
It's like a victimhood website.
It is. Yeah, exactly.
It is. That's 100%.
And I will point out that like not all of them were like that. Like the other article was like she went to camp. She decided to go to camp on her own. She like had like a relatively okay experience, but she also like grew up, and then she looked into like this study that was done on the season 8 contestants of The Biggest Loser. And she found out, or well, the people found out in the study, and then she relayed to me through this article that something happens like when you have this like rapid weight loss in like a really compressed amount of time. It really shifts your metabolic load rate or something like that. I can't remember what the exact term was, but it basically makes it to where you need like a disproportionately less amount of calories to maintain your new weight than you would have guessed anyways. So it's not just less than what you were eating before you lost all the weight. It's like even less than you would have imagined. And so then they're not used to eating that much food because they're eating even more food at the places where they lost the weight than they should to maintain that weight when they get back, because their metabolism has just been thrown out of whack.
Right.
And so it's like a 100% yo-yo thing. Like you get out, and it wasn't 100%, not ever. I think 6 out of 8 of the contestants all put on even more weight than they had before.
Interesting. Yeah, because I would like to see the efficacy of these fat camps too, and then I want to make the side. Yeah, right.
It's high. What I found out is that most people that have good experiences decided to go on their own.
Right.
Like there was this one kid, Xander, who was like going because he wanted to make the football team at his school, but he couldn't because he couldn't make the runs and stuff. And like they did like a 5K run at this one camp as like the last hoorah thing before everybody went home. And he was like, he did it. He was one of the first kids to finish. And he was like, yeah, when I get home, I'm going to do some more 5Ks and I'm going to do like half marathons. Right. And I was like, a little tear came to my eye. I was like, yo, I'm going to look up if this Xander kid's like on a college football team or something. Like this kid seems like he going to go some places. Yeah. But it goes to speak like the other kid that did really well went in because he was having really bad health problems. And so I was like, you can be motivated from like running away from something or running towards something if it's internalized. But if somebody sends you to a camp that you don't want to be at, it's never going to work.
It's not going to work. You know what I mean?
It's not going to work.
That's one thing I picked up from this. And I also want to make the caveat before everybody comes at us in the comments. Like, I don't care if you're fat, be fat. Like, that's not
totally.
Like, I have no thing against fat people. I do think it's weird when we try to like, sway the statistics and stuff. Like if you want to shoot up heroin, I'm also cool with that. But like don't go run around acting like heroin's like a good thing to do, or like
for you.
It's okay to be on heroin type thing. Like if you're choosing that, that's fine. Whatever. And whatever. We can do a whole episode on like being fat, like, and we should actually. But nonetheless, I digress. What was I talking about before that?
You were talking about. I had just made the point that the efficacy rate of the camps.
If you have a standard, right, that is applied to you, that you do not believe that you can achieve, then that standard becomes oppressive. Right. And you start to feel like a victim, like you said. So if you have this, somebody says lose 20 pounds, but you just do not feel like that's in your purview, or that you have no desire to do that, then now these people constantly pressuring you to do that makes you feel like I'm being bullied now. I'm a victim, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, even though they're trying to make you quote unquote better or whatever, if you don't want to get, then that's oppressive, and you're just like slowing me down essentially, or making me feel bad about myself for where I want to be. You know, like, hence this woman, she just wanted to be fat. So it's like, if you go to a camp where they're like, it's not cool to be fat, and then you're like, but I want to be fat, and then you're just feeling bad about
and everybody's
being
like,
the person.
Oh, you're a bad person.
Yeah,
you want to
be
fat,
right? So
which
it's
is like that's not how it is.
That's not. And so I definitely get why she might have felt that oppressiveness.
Oh, totally.
Or that, like we said, that there probably isn't a high like success rate for people who go into prison, people who go to these boot camp things and stuff like that, because the willingness or the want to change is step one. You have to motivate, whether through pain or whatever, to change, to really change.
It's the classic lead a horse to water.
Right.
Like, this might, from everyone on the outside looking in, this might be what is best for her. We're going to send you to this camp because you're obese and we want you to be healthier.
Right.
But maybe to everyone but her, it makes sense. But maybe to her, like you said, now it's oppressive. Now you don't feel like you can meet the quota.
Yeah.
So now you have stress, you have anxiety, you have that's not going to help you lose weight.
Right. Not at all.
You know what I mean?
No,
and then when you get out and you go,
inspire you to be like a good kid either,
and like, to keep it going once all these constraints have been removed on you. Like
exactly, and that's what seems to be proven throughout, not just the fat camps but disciplinary camps as well. Is the minute you get out and you're not around it anymore and you go back to that life, a large majority make the decision to just go back to that life and do not maintain the same standard. Yeah. One of my favorite stories from one of the boot camp stories that I watched was a 16-year-old girl who had just had a child, and she was living in foster care her whole life, has a kid at like 15. And then she's like, look, I want to make a better life for myself. And they send her to this boot camp thing because she's starting to kind of like drift away from school and things like that. She's having problems. And at the end of it, they kind of check up on her again, and she still hasn't like found a home for her and her daughter or whatever, but she's like actively working on her GED. She's making the changes you would want to see made by a 17-year-old who went to something like this to be a better person and potentially like get her life on track. And like, yeah, brought a tear to my eye, man, just seeing how dedicated she was, because she was one of the few kids that they followed who from day one was like, I'm just trying to make a better life for me and my daughter. Yeah. That's it. And they let her see her daughter. Like, once you get a certain level of it in, they surprise her and they're like, here's your daughter for an hour. And like that cool shit pulled the heartstrings, bro. Because it's a kid with a kid, man. Yeah. It's tough. It is tough. But, there are success stories.
She's on the path.
Yeah, the whole path. Like, dang, that's cool. And like you said, I think that if you want to better yourself, there is something to be said about finding resources. Like this is the same thing that with like addiction treatment centers, they work. They work
really well when you want to be
want to
treated.
Go and want to get better, then they work amazing. But if you just shove your person like, get in this treatment center, you're gonna get clean. Yeah, for a while I'm there, and I'm immediately gonna.
This is like. This whole concept of like forcing somebody to do something they don't want to do just shapes like my whole worldview. I'm like, can't you see why this whole tactic, like just like, we're just gonna shove this drug addict in rehab even though he doesn't want to go. No. Well, how effective is that? Oh, it's not at all. Yeah. Well, maybe we should stop doing that to people.
100%.
I did it to myself. I was pretty neutral on the government before I joined the army. Yeah. And then I got out of the army and I'm like, yo, man, fuck this government, dog. Fuck this place.
That happened to Thomas Sowell. He was like super into, he was a Marxist all through college and everything. Even went through Milton Friedman's class at Chicago. Got out, worked one summer as an intern for the like labor department. It was like, yo, government's on some whack shit.
So funny. I had the same thought the other day. I was like looking through some of my paperwork and we were talking about some ticket that Jessica got that might have been like a fix-it ticket or not or whatever. And I was just like, I fucking hate the government. I hate this shit. I was like, can I just live my fucking life? Like, what is this ticketing? I'm not hurting nobody. I'm not stealing. I'm just trying to live out here, and y'all are just slapping me with citations for living. And that brings me to probably my last point in this conversation, which is that this idea that these camps, all these things, like you were talking about, conformity, man. Conformity is not an excuse to label people or to imprison people. You know, it's like, oh, you don't want them to be gay, or school. They're not good at school. That is okay. Like, I don't care what anybody else tells me out here. Like, if you don't have many people have found success with the 8th grade education, with the ability to communicate and read and write.
If you can read and write and like count to 20, you're pretty much good.
In the age of TikTok, you just got to be able to do this.
You know what I'm saying?
Like, so coordination comes in hand more.
Like, I get that we would like our population to be highly educated. I would love that too.
Yeah.
You know, I get that you would like a majority of people to find success in this area, or not cuss in public, or what. Like, I get that would be nice. But this idea that it is required, that you have to be good at school, that you have to, dude, like I said, the idea that if I'm at 16 have decided that I'm gonna stay out till 11 and my parents would like it to be 9, I get that, and I get, oh, well, they're your kids and all this stuff. But I beseech the parents, not the system. But for you to understand, you know, like, that these are human beings and that they're going to do things in their own way. And it doesn't matter if you grew up really religious and you're really strict, or you're really this, or you really like country music and your kid likes Metallica, you know, or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not some reason to be like, they fuck with video games heavy. Like, there are multi-millionaires out here who play video games for a living these days. So the idea that that's somehow like a punishable offense, that you now need to be stripped of good tasting oatmeal because you like
strip all the sugar out of your oatmeal,
is like crazy to me. I get that there are sometimes, you know, where okay, your kid did try and murder somebody. All right, maybe you want to do something about that. You know, your kid is hurting, stealing, whatever. Like, there are really out of control kids, and I get that. And you need somewhere to put them, probably a juvenile detention center or a prison, same place we put other people where we can't
if the parents aren't, like, you know, if like 3 strikes and the parents out, basically. Right. Like, if like, hey, you know, your son did this, we understand, blah, blah, blah. Comes back like, hey, you know, like, second time we've seen him or her, you know, like, we need you to keep an eye on them, okay? Like, for real. Third time the kid comes, it's like, all right, your kid's going to juvie or whatever, because clearly you're not helping them in any. But again, like, I would love it if juvie wasn't like just child prison. Like, if juvie was like a actual corrections facility where they correct bad behaviors by like getting people to understand why they do bad behaviors in the first place, and like, why is it that you're rebelling against your parents? Well, you know, like, they just don't really have, like, the amount of freedom that children don't have these days, it just blows my mind. Like, and it makes me think, like, the parents forget that you learn best from making mistakes. Right. You know what I mean? Like, the times when I learned, like, some of the biggest lessons in my life are when I fucked up the most, and I had, like, the most, and it's like, I feel like most people parent in a way that keeps the amount of headaches that they have to deal with at a minimum.
1,000%.
They subconsciously parent in a way that makes it convenient for them. And I'm like, that's not your role. You're not there for you anymore. Like, it's about your kid. Like, you're supposed to parent in a way that best sets them up. And guess what? That involves a lot of bullshit for you to have to deal with.
A repeat offender of this, dude. I swear to God. Like, the reason the internet raised my child was because I was lazy. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, hey, watch this YouTube so that you'll shut the fuck up and leave me alone.
I got other shit going on.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I tell my kid all the time, like, the reason you're not allowed to walk on the table is not because I give a fuck about the table. It's that if you fall and crack your head open, I'm the one that has to spend the rest of my evening at the ER, like, undoing it.
And staples.
And so I definitely see why you said parents don't want you going to prison, going to jail, and all that stuff, because until you're 18, all those things
fall back on them,
back on me. But that's why I said there's levels to this shit, and you have to be aware of that. Like I said, there's a difference between having an actual out of control child and a child that's just not doing what you want them to do.
I've got a good kind of final thought on this that touches on a subject we haven't touched on. So where I stand with this is like, I can see fat camps, I can see child detention centers like being places where if the incentives are correct, that it could help children more. Mm-hmm. I look at the current incentive of a place. Let's take one of these child centers in Ohio. They know that they have a 96% recidivism rate. They know that. Yeah. They're very aware of that. Oh, they are incentivized to keep that rate high because they get paid when children act bad and are sent to their places.
Yep.
So the same way like a prison wants to be full of criminals is the same way these places want to be full of troubled teens.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So if you fix the problem, if every kid, if you have a 96% success rate, your business isn't going to make a lot of money.
Right.
So now you have a profit incentive that is actively hurting children, actively negative, morally and ethically, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a large conflict of interest there.
Yeah.
You know.
And then you start looking at one of the ones, like some of the ones that are sent, that like a kid gets sent there by a judge, like a juvenile judge. And now you start opening the door to some of these judges get kickbacks. Some of these judges get money based on every single like head that they send. So they send more heads. Yeah. And once again, when you can, if we could fix that profit incentive somehow or subsidize it in some way, maybe we could try like have a better rate. But
I'd love to see
the current system doesn't allow for that.
I'd love to see a pay by the pound at the end type of fat camp thing.
Yes.
Like we have a flat, like we have a flat rate of what you pay per pound your child loses while at our camp.
Wow.
Yeah, results based.
That would change all the incentives.
You don't pay until they come back. If they lost 10 pounds and you owe us $1,000.
Yeah. I feel that.
But that's where I wanted to kind of end this.
That's a great point.
My side of the conversation is that like these aren't going to work as long as the incentives are bad.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the things I noticed too is like when I was kind of just assessing vibe situation, we were talking about our camps and like how we had great experiences when you're good and everything's good, but then when you're bad, you get sent to a place where it tends to be bad, you know, it falls in line with that. So it's like
it's a punishment,
right? Well, exactly, and then it's like I said, these kids they don't have rights and they're more likely to be abused. They already were more likely to be abused in the first place, and that's why they ended up troubled teens. Right. And then you put them in a place that they're even more vulnerable or more abused. Yeah. And it's like, look, like if you have somebody who's a troubled teen, they need more care, more love, more support than you're giving to me at fucking Bible camp. You know, I'm just like, woo, fucking water slides and shit. You know, like that's just wild to me. Yeah.
When I got sent to alternative high school, like maybe this is what they're thinking, but like I remember like I got sent to alternative high school for getting busted with weed like at the very end of my junior year. So like start of my senior year, I'm at alternative high school. And I remember like I was in there and I was thinking to myself like I don't want to hang out with these people for the rest of my senior year. So like I was like trying to make sure that I got out of there. But I was talking to people that were there for like they spent their whole time of high school at that school. And I was like, that doesn't surprise me. You know what I mean? Like just like what happens in prison, like you go to these places and then it becomes like a rabbit hole because they're not set up right. Like they're not, like John said, they don't have the right incentives. They don't have the right directions. Like it's just, and not that I'm saying that I know what all these things should be, but clearly when you look at like the success rates and stuff, like they're clearly not working.
Yeah.
You know, or they're working for a different reason than we assume that they should be.
Yeah, for profit.
The lizard people that control everything. They really love it. They love it.
Yeah,
they're getting their results.
Digging that one.
Shoveling all that cow shit.
Yep, 100%.
Turnabout ranch.
Keeping the lizard ranch clean.
What was it? Jeffrey Epstein and his friends like were like the number one benefactors to like child abuse.
Yeah,
like,
those child organizations.
And stuff. So it's like you gotta be careful out here with
kids organizations are interesting because it's like it's just like it's like a beehive for a bear. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, where do you think you'll find a lot of sexual predators? Places where it's easy to get to kids.
Yeah.
So
that's
like,
why
if you're gonna put your kids somewhere, make sure you know where and who with and for how long and what's going on.
That's why you see a lot of times in parts of the world where there's a catastrophic event, you'll have people who are like, oh, we're here to help the orphans.
Yeah.
No, you're here to traffic them
Yeah,
orphans.
you're here to collect a bunch of free orphans,
Yeah.
you bastards.
Yep.
That's true. Damn, didn't ever think of
Yeah,
that.
look into the situation in Haiti where they tried to cross into the Dominican Republic with like a busload of orphans.
Yeah, and they were like, "Oh, these are just kids.
Yeah, these are our
all
orphans.
lost,
Yeah.
you know, at the thing." And it's like,
We're on a
I have
field trip.
parents.
No, yeah. These are all orphans. I have parents. No, you don't. Quiet, you.
Shut up, you.
I'm not dead yet. He's dead. He's dying right now, actually.
Very funny.
He just like running through the streets. I just see some like woman in a like long skirt snatching babies out of like a dying man's hands. He's like having a touching moment with his son. Like, make sure to be the man of the house and take care of mom now. And some woman just comes for him. Like, thanks for the money, douchebag.
Here's another one. I got another one.
Hey, there's a little bit of resistance from this guy. Hold on, let me. She's like kicking him.
No, that's the most important part, because one of the things the articles I didn't really get to it, but was the National Youth Rights Association, and they were really pushing back on some of these camps and all that stuff, and like how you know, like you were saying, they don't have good that's where I saw the recidivism and all that stuff, and why it creates resentment and emotional distance and all, but just going against it. And it was like such a cool, I was like, yeah, exactly, like youth rights, man. Like there's a conversation to be had about that, about
Facts.
like, you know, a 13-year-old kid just can't be property of the parents, you know, like that.
They don't need the autonomy of every decision because they're still a child.
Right.
But what rights do they have? Whew,
Right.
But kids' rights.
Kids' rights.
Good,
That's a
good discussion.
conversation.
Yeah, look
Good
for that
discussion.
one here in the future.
Yeah, that's a good conversation.
That's a good
to have.
conversation. I would have made some terrible choices.
Depending on what your rights were.
I mean, I did make terrible choices.
Yeah, but yeah, that was a great conversation, man. It was cool.
Yeah,
talking about that, like I said, highly enlightening for me, because I know I won't be doing this. The answer to me is take more responsibility as a parent.
Yep.
Like make sure that my kids don't end up in a situation where I feel like I have to camp them. You know?
Yeah.
But,
And if you do, like if you get to the point where you're like so lost about how to take care of your child that you feel like you need to send them to a camp, that's the very best moment for you to start looking at how you've been parenting for the last couple of years. Like just take a quick like afternoon off and just start looking at it, be like, wow, what exactly have I been doing that led us to this point?
Not to mention research. Do your research.
And that's what I was gonna say. Do hella research. Like find the good camp. Like, you know, take responsibility for the fact that you did suck, and then pay that extra big buck to like get them in that good camp, and then go take your happy ass down there every Sunday or Thursday, whatever, and hey, just checking in on my little Johnny. Make sure you guys aren't raping him in the back corner, right? You know, don't sit them in there for 9 months and just be like, yep, they're good.
Parent your children.
Basically.
I feel like that's good advice.
It's good advice.
Anyways, hey, man, we definitely appreciate you guys. If you have any experiences in kid camps or want to add your tidbits, we'd love to read them in the comments. We'll definitely get back to you guys. And until next time, we'll see you.
Peace.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber,